One of the first things we need to get set up in our systems is some live video inputs. So let's take a look at how we would set up a hardware input, an NDI input, and a streaming IP format like SRT into vMix, and then how we would do the same thing in TriCaster. Here in vMix, to set up an input, we would go to the Add Input button, and then we're going to set up the same type of sources on both systems. So let's start with the hardware input. We could go to a camera. We could pick our interface. In this case, it is a USB to HDMI adapter. When I hit OK, you can see that that source appears. Let's add an NDI input. And I've got a camera that I'm going to bring in. There it is. You can see that camera pointed at me. And let's set up an SRT input. I've already configured the SRT source on my phone. And if I open that up, you'll see that iPhone video is here. Now let's go do these same inputs and set them up inside a TriCaster. Now, one thing we need to be aware of is that on the TriCaster, we have different inputs assigned for different purposes. So in the case of live video inputs, those are going to come in on the inputs 1 through input 8, or however many inputs are available on your TriCaster model. To set these up, you can put your pointer in the multi-view area in the monitor for the input you want to configure, and you'll see a little gear appear in the bottom right corner. So this is the gear for input 1, this is the gear for input 2, and so on. And clicking on that gear will open up the property window so that we can configure that input. You can also access that same window by right-clicking on the program or preview rows on the button you want to configure, and when you right-click, you'll see a configure option, and this opens up the same window. Now, to configure a source, that is under the Input tab, and you can see source listed here. And then in this dropdown, here are all the different things we could put in for a source. The local category contains anything that's directly set up on the TriCaster itself. So this is where you'd find hardware inputs or other streaming IP formats. And then everything below the word local, these are all the NDI sources out on the network. So let's set up those same sources we just saw. The first was a hardware input. So if I go to local, there's my USB to HDMI input. I'll select that, and you can see the video coming in on input 1. Now let's bring in an NDI source on input 2. So that's going to be below the word local. I've got different cameras and sources here. I'm going to use this camera, and there is the source pointed at me. And then let's bring in an SRT source. So on the third input, we can configure under the local category SRT and other streaming IP formats using this Add IP Source option. You'll go in this window and configure the type of source you want and its settings, and then those will appear in the list. And so I've done that already, and I'll select the application running on my phone. And when you select it, there is the video coming off my phone pointed out the window.